So hello everyone, welcome to our webinar. This is another webinar in our SociSDG project. This time our topic is Zero Hunger, and we will be exploring ways to achieve more sustainable food production and distribution systems with companies, with consumers, with civil society organizations, and so on. So the agenda is the following. So I will briefly introduce the topic. Then I will give word to Professor Zdravko Mazatan. He is a director of agricultural development at Podravka, one of the biggest food companies in our region. And after that, I will give word to Marie Popoulos from Infarm. Infarm is a new and upcoming company who is doing amazing things in sustainable food production in Germany, but also in other countries. And after that, we will have time for some questions and discussion, and of course, concluding thoughts. So just some general rules before we start. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be published on our YouTube channel. If you'd like to use the hashtag, you can use hashtag SociSDG. Also, your voice will be automatically muted upon joining the webinar because it allows for more smoother sound, and also to ask questions or engage in discussion, please use the chat window on your left side. And if you have any comments or suggestions, you can write us at socisdg@gmail.com. So my name is Marina, and I work for Croatian Institute for CSR, and we are the coordinators of this Erasmus Plus project. And I will just briefly introduce the topic before I give word to our speakers of today. So as I mentioned, today we are focusing on SDG2 Zero Hunger, but as we will see, it is closely connected and interrelated to all the other sustainable development goals. So goal 2 aims to end hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. But what does that actually mean? As we can see in the picture, all SDGs are interrelated. So in order to have more sustainable agriculture and more healthier ecosystems, we need to rethink and reconsider our food production, our food distribution. That will also improve access to basic goods for marginalized groups, which will make for better health, better equality, better education, and so on. So there are a number of issues that are related to education, employment, healthcare, climate change, resource efficiency, and others. And to address the SDG and to start working on it, we first must address some of those underlying problems. So to eliminate hunger also means to eradicate poverty, because, and this is especially relevant to people in disaster-stricken areas, and for people living in areas that are prone to climate change, so that are hit with drought and flooding and so on. Also, it's important to expand social protection schemes to the poor and vulnerable, and there is a direct link with access to good and nutritious food and education, because research has shown that when children have access to one nutritional meal a day, they perform better in school, and then they perform better at their jobs and so on. So it's no surprise that it's really interlinked. It's also important for in reducing inequalities, so SDG 10, because malnutrition and hunger disproportionately affect the most vulnerable, so children, elderly, people with disabilities, and so on. And it's of course related to good health and well-being, because only if we have access to safe and nutritious food, we will ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all. So, but the SDG 3 is controversial in this regard, because it's not only related to the malnutrition and all the illnesses that stem from it, but also to overconsumption, to obesity, to diabetes, and a number of related health conditions that have become, unfortunately, epidemic in developed countries. But also, when we speak about the planet and resources, so more responsible use of resources in the agri-food industry will also help to protect life below water, which is the aim of SDG 14, and life on land. It will also stimulate and protect biodiversity. It will also promote healthier ecosystems, and so on. So, in a nutshell, we need an integrated, holistic approach to these questions, and that is the only way we can move forward. And any company that wishes to think about integrating SDG2 in their strategies and their business plans needs to think about this in a holistic manner, as we will see. So, some of the risks and problems that are related to this specific goals are, for example, population growth, as we will see, also climate change, because climate change disproportionately affects the poorest areas around the globe. Also, food distribution and global supply chain. It's linked to questions of traceability. So how do we know where does our food exactly come from? And recent scandals in Europe have shown that we cannot be 100% sure where our meat, for example, or our vegetables come from. Also, food waste is a huge problem, and connected with that is overconsumption and health risks, and also carbon footprint of food industry. Some solutions and opportunities are, for example, companies can, as we will see, stimulate local production, which is beneficial both for the local communities and for the environment in the long run, and also for the company, because companies need consumer base, and if they give people opportunities to earn a decent income from agriculture, they will also have consumers. Also, companies should consider to introduce circular models, so to reuse and use waste byproducts from their industry. For example, in Italy, orange peels that are left when producing oranges can be used to produce fibers for the clothing industry, for the textile sector. Also, it's important to promote biodiversity, and we as consumers should consider, for example, buying locally produced food. We should consider reducing food waste, using less packaging, being more aware and more mindful of what exactly we are consuming and how can we reduce our carbon footprint or our ecological footprint. So, goal has several targets and indicators, and we will be focusing on select few. So, it's important to stimulate the agricultural productivity of food producers so that they can have a decent income and they can live off of their production. Also, we need to implement food production systems that are resilient enough to so that they can respond to climate change, flooding, and droughts, and so on. So extreme weather conditions that are more and more common. Also, it's important to, as I mentioned, to promote biodiversity, so to maintain genetic diversity of seeds, plants, and so on. And it's also important to, of course, stimulate investment in research and development of this topic, because only with innovation in the food industry can we achieve some of these goals. So when it comes to zero hunger, so the number of hungry and malnourished people in the world, this number is decreasing, thankfully. So before the Sustainable Development Goals, we had the Millennial Goals, and those have succeeded in reducing the number of hungry people in the world. So, as I mentioned, one big problem is population growth. So, the world population will reach approximately 10 billion by 2050, and it will mostly be happening in the least developed regions of the world. So the question is how to produce enough food for the entire population in the future. And according to the Food and Agriculture Organization, the answer is not to produce more food, but to make better use of food already available, because right now we throw away almost 1/3 of all food produced for human consumption. So in developing countries, it's called food loss due to poor equipment, transportation, and so on. And in developed countries, it's called food waste, and it occurs at retail and consumer levels. For example, in the EU, most food waste arises in the household, well, less during the production and processing, of course. So if we manage to reduce food waste, it would mean that we would decrease pressures on natural resources. So water and, of course, soil and land, as we can see here. So goal 12, which is really closely connected to this goal, aims to halve per capita global food waste at the retail and consumer level and reduce food losses along the production chain. One example that I would like to show is a campaign from a French supermarket chain called Intermarché. In 2014, they have made a campaign called Inglorious Bastards, or Ugly Fruits and Vegetables. So they wanted to create a consumer awareness campaign by highlighting the ugly or the uneven fruits and vegetables that will otherwise be thrown away. And they are thrown away because of the cosmetic standards, because supermarkets can only sell food if it's perfect, if it has the same shape and so on. So if we try to raise our awareness about the food loss, we will see that even the ugly fruits and vegetables are nice, have good nutritional value, and so on. So that campaign was a huge success, and it created, it reached like 15 million people in France, and it meant that the traffic was increased by 24%. So this is one example of how companies can implement sustainable development strategies into their business models. And now I will give word to Professor Zdravko Matutan. He, as I mentioned, he works at Podravka at Agricultural Development, and he will tell us a bit about Podravka, and he will show us what Podravka, as the biggest food company in the region, is doing in order to introduce sustainability in their company.
I'm Zdravko Matutan, coming from the food processing company Podravka, placed in northwest part of Croatia. It's one of the larger national and regional food processing companies. In the first, I would like to introduce you with some facts about our company, which started work 70 years ago, and this year we're celebrating 70 years of our working. We have about 1,000 various products, primary food products, but some is pharmaceutical products, and more than 6,500 employees, most of them in Croatia, but some of them in countries in Europe and Australia and United States. Our turnover is about $500 million of euros per year. We producing in 17 factories in 4 countries in the world. We started with food processing, improving our production with dried soups, seasonings, and condiments during the last 70 years. Last few years, we improving our business to buying some companies which is compatible with our production in the region. Our companies has offices in 25 countries in the world, and we export our food and another products in more of 60 countries all over the world. not just in Europe and in other countries all over the world. Uh, at some market we have own distribution, but in some we have distribution by a local distributor of our product. Our factory is mostly in Croatia, in several towns, but so we have some production in Slovenia, Bosnia, Czech Republic, where we produce some specific food. I am manager of agricultural development. It is one part of research and development department which take care about agricultural production for needs of our processing industry, and we developing new varieties, taking care about safety and traceability in agricultural production. So we collecting the method data from our fields to predicting some plant disease and pests and ensuring that the production will be safe and ecologically sustainable. We so participate in various projects supported by Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Science, and so interdisciplinary the project with another colleagues, technologists, and in chain of the food processing. We have some control systems, monitoring for the seed production, testing the seed quality, ensuring for our farmers good seed for the production of raw materials which we need. So several years ago we started with the breeding for some important species of vegetable for us, like the pepper, where we created two new paper varieties suitable for our agricultural conditions and for needs of our processing industry. Some part of agricultural production we organize on own land, but mostly of our products are produced in cooperation with the local farmers. Before introducing of the new varieties, new technologies, we testing at our experimental fields where we have some variety trials, some technological trials. During the preparing the season, we have the meetings with the farmers to discussing about problems in previous years and showing the new knowledge, new results of experiments done a year before. During the vegetation season, we are collecting the farmers to the field to show the new varieties, new technologies in aim to improving and developing our agricultural production. Our agronomists are present at the field to control the use of pesticides, to determining of some problems during the vegetation and suggesting the farmers what is the best in this moment to do. In some projects, testing new technologies and implementing in production to improve the raw materials for our processing needs. Each year at the few locations we have testing fields where we testing the variety in new technologies. We take care about seed production for our needs. For some products like the paper, we have own variety, producing the seeds, taking the care about the variety, the purity of genetic of germination in our laboratory, testing the quality of the seed, and plant material, determining if it's some problems and suggesting the farmer how solve the problem. Especially taking care about sustainable production, and most of our production own and production at our cooperants are on our supervision. All started with soil analysis according to the data about soil. We recommending the fertilizing, taking the care that production will be ecologically acceptable. In our breeding program, we take care about varieties which is suitable for our local production. So we creating high quality and high yielding variety of red corn type papers suitable for domestic production. During the stage of the seed production, we taking care of genetic purity, taking for the field just typical fruits of our varieties, extracting the seed, and from this seed we are organizing the commercial seed production, from which we are supplying our farmers for production.
Thank you very much, Marco, for your presentation. We have seen how a big multinational company is approaching sustainability in their food production and food distribution chain. And now we will see a different example. So we will see how food can be produced without soil, without sun, in every weather condition imaginable. We will hear from Marie Popoulos from InFarm Interurban Farming, and she will explain us a bit about her company and about their sustainability agenda.
Hello, everybody. Do you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah? Great. Well, thank you very much first for inviting me. I am Marie Popoulos, sustainability lead at InFarm, which is a company doing indoor hydroponics, vertical agriculture. And basically, before creating this position, which is pretty dating back to the beginning of January, I've been working for more than a year in developing the operations at InFarm. And at that time, we were only 20 people when I joined 1.5 years ago. And today, we are more than 130 people. So it's an exponential growth, we can say. So we are having more than 40 farming units now dispatched in Berlin, and we are entering the French market this summer. So pretty exciting times, and I'm happy to give you a bit more details about InFarm. So here's the agenda. So I'm going to tell you a few words about what we actually do and our mission and vision, then I will switch to the topic that interests us most, sustainability, how we define sustainability at InFarm, and then how does that sustainability offer actually contribute to SDG number 2. At last, I will say a few words about our strategy, which I said is pretty new, and the steps ahead. So in farm, we say that we are the new farmers and that the city is our farm. On the right side, you can see a beautiful lettuce, which is one of the products that we're farming along a vast array of aromatic herbs. And so our vision basically is to contribute to self-sufficient cities by creating a local food system, by providing people with fresh, healthy, local, and affordable produce. So a few words about that. Actually, let's say the starting statement is that we're facing a lot of challenges: climate change, global loss of land productivity, food wastage, as you said, Marina, is also a big topic. So due to different climatic drivers, but also harmful land management techniques, are seriously challenging our capacity to meet the exploding demand for food. And besides that, we know that 30 to 50% of food is being wasted along global value chains, which are getting longer the more we globalize. So there is no doubt that we need to rethink the way we grow our food, but also the way we distribute and consume it. And we believe at InFarm that by growing and distributing it at the same place, well, this is paving the way, or at least it could be part of a future solution. So what do we do? Actually, we are growing where you are, so bringing and farming into cities. So with the vertical indoor hydroponics, hydroponics is a system relying only on water with the nutrient solutions. And we're not only a farming company, we're also a manufacturing company, because we build the farms, install them at clients, and I offer a full service that including the planting of the seedlings, harvesting, plant healthcare, and so on. So our offer is articulated around three products/services. This is why we call it farming as a service, which is a specific set of varieties, the crop, the farm. So the farm means the infrastructure, but also the engine behind it, and the service. And how do we do that? Basically, we are working on a smart, sustainable farming system that that is developed internally in our R&D department. So that allows us to centrally and remotely manage our network of decentralized farms. What does that mean? Basically, that we can control the dosing system of the nutrients, the flushing of the water, humidity, temperature, and so on. Yeah. Now coming to farms, here you can see on the two pictures we have two different sizes for now, models. On the left side, you see two of our farming units at an Edeka supermarket, and on the right side, it's in our facilities. And we are selling to supermarkets mainly, but also to restaurants, which are totally different kind of clients. So here, in a very, very quick depiction, so the idea is to say there are global value chains or let's say supply chain in that case, with production, handling, processing, distribution, consumption, and waste. And from farm to fork, the produce is traveling as far as veggies and leafy greens are concerned. They are traveling around 1,500 kilometers. Whereas in the InFarm case, they are only traveling 10 kilometers. So, well, here is actually a nice gift that was supposed to be animated, but it's just a picture to say, okay, what is sustainability? Sustainability is a matter of balance. So I'm not going to spend too much time here. It's very theoretical, but I think the framework on the right side, which has been developed by Kate Raworth in the Donut Economic book that she published not so long ago, is giving us like a good idea or a good depiction of on the outer cycle the planetary boundaries, which are the or ecological ceilings as she calls it, and in the middle the human rights. Okay, and the basic idea is to place these human rights in the center of environment, replacing people in the center of environment and not environmental in a department of a company. And as a business and individuals, we should focus on staying and operating in these two, between these two boundaries, which is called the safe and just space for humanity. Okay. Now coming to our sustainability offer. So coming back to our mission and vision. So I said previously that we want to provide people with fresh, healthy, local, and affordable produce. So actually we are articulating these values, or like we have three main outcomes, which are freshness and health, locality, and affordability. And they are all intrinsically, linked. On the one side, health and freshness, we can understand, or we understand health as a byproduct of freshness. Freshness being itself a byproduct of locality, of course, because you produce. I mean, the product is not traveling, but health is also a byproduct of locality because thanks to locality, we are free to select the varieties that are maximizing their nutritional value. Then talking about affordability, affordability is also has a link with health as being two of the major indicators of food security. But I'll come back to our contribution in the next slide. And as a side note, affordability is also linked to the price stability, which is guaranteed by our capacity to control the climate parameters. And by producing year-round and having stable production, so consistency of supply. And finally, locality, which is actually the most important one, by allowing us to cut food miles, so CO2 from freight, and especially from air freight. If you think about a lot of aromatic herbs, at least in Germany, are being imported from Israel, which are 3,800 kilometers by airplane. And also waste happening during transportation, which is anyway very difficult to quantify, but still a reality. Second, locality also allows us to have a longer shelf life because we harvest it, it's very fresh, and it's directly available for the consumer, and we sell our plants together with their growing medium, so the shelf life, or let's say the life expectancy of the herbs, is also longer at home. And yeah, we can also talk about locality and transparently as being very linked, and you can develop a full set of educational material around it. So yeah, that's it for the first few words of how we understand sustainability at InFarm. I was focusing on these 3 points, which are what stems from our end product, but we understand sustainability actually as being broader than that, and has to be developed along the full value chain. So I'm sorry for the formatting issues because this was not planned, but I'm not going to go so much into details. I was trying to depict what I basically said before. So locality, the social impacts, locality, health, freshness, education, transparency. On the environmental impacts, we have carbon neutrality. We're not there yet, but I will talk about this a bit later. Focusing on resource efficiency, low water footprint. And for sure, on the economic aspect, profit, brand differentiation, but also new types of job creations. And all these, I mean, in farm, the three pillars of sustainability have to be understood as being integrated in nature and being surrounded by a lot of different factors that are influencing the way we are developing a local food system. And these are socioeconomic drivers. We can think about demographics, right? Climatic drivers, but more generally the planetary boundaries, the political drivers, and the cultural ones that are driving how people do produce and what consume, and what's their expectation. So before focusing on the SDG2, I just wanted to make clear that one of the first steps for us was to understand our different contribution at each step of what I call the value chain, even though it's not fully depicted here, but at least you see the different steps. So, okay, on the sourcing side, we're contributing to these 13, 12, and 15 ones, trying to set requirements that are along these goals. And then farm production, on the plant production and retail, we're contributing to number 2, 13, and 6. Come back to number 2 in detail, and so on. Now, focusing on SDG number 2, well, first going from left to right, in green you can see our main value clusters, as I call them. So, nutrition and taste, resilient farming practices, and local distribution. I've put farming practices and local distribution together because they're happening at the same place. And then in red, you can see the drivers of our added value, and then in gold, you have a declination of our contribution to the SDG number 2. And I also I've integrated SDG number 12. I don't want to go into details, but they are very much connected, so I thought it was important. Yes, so we are contributing mostly to SDG number 2.4, in that we are developing a system that allows us to increase productivity. If you let's maybe take all these sub-SDGs or the value creation one by one. So the change of the space usage, first we are able to have a new kind of usage of space. So for now we're using it in a restaurant and in supermarkets, but you can think of other locations in cities that are not used and could be repurposed. And this is allowed by the fact that we're soil-free. So we're importing organic matter. It's not that we're not using land at all. We're using a growing medium, but it's embedded, let's say, in our supply chain. Also, the verticality and the yield productivity allows us to have a pretty small land footprint, which is very important in very dense cities. If you think of Berlin, it's not so important because Berlin, you have a lot of space, but coming to Paris is a different story. And we are able to increase yield productivity as compared to a traditional greenhouse, I would say, thanks to the climatic and controlled environment I was depicting at the beginning of the presentation. So that allows us to get away from seasonality and to produce all year round. And potentially, the more we go forward, we'll really be able to make yield projections and so on. So data gathering will be also a big part of it. Now, resilient farming practices, it's a very, very important point. We don't use any pesticides. We don't use any GMOs. Anyway, here it's in Europe forbidden. And we use organic and non-treated seeds. They're not all organic. You might already know that we can't be certified organic farming in Europe. And these, together with the climatic control, allows us to develop a system that is climate resilient. because we're not depending so much on the, well, not anymore on the natural climate. And then local distribution, well, locality, as I talked already about, transparency and sustainable packaging. So altogether are contributing to responsible consumption. We also like to emphasize that we do create all the types of jobs by being urban farmers, and that it contributes to the local economic development. So our sustainability strategy, in a few words, I will try to accelerate and not to infringe on the Q&A time. The idea is to align our goals to the Sustainable Development Goals and to the Smart City ones, as to have a common vocabulary to talk to policy and research, enhance collaboration. So the first, let's say, point or move for me was to identify the points to be improved on the environmental, ethical, and social sides, and to acknowledge that as an ongoing process. So we've run a little life cycle assessment last year, but which was not extensive, and which was also along the formal operation. Let's say in-farm 1 year ago was not in-farm today, so we need to update it. But it already helped us a lot to identify the big projects we have to work on. So after defining the goal, we declined them into different projects, and I will come back to very concrete examples. And developing also key performance indicators to be able to measure the progress. So, for example, one goal is to decrease our CO2 emissions linked to our direct electricity consumption, and this is something like everybody might, wonder. We are very energy driven, and energy is one main focus. While indirect energy consumption comes in the second step. So basically it's beginning with the highest impact, low-hanging fruits, let's say. But another one is also to reduce our dependence on non-renewable energy, on non-renewable raw materials, and that will be relevant, for example, for many things on the manufacturing side or on the packaging side. And we're very much focused for now on our end product, because this is kind of, what the end consumer sees is not the full picture, but we have to start there. And sustainability, we understand it as research-based. I'm myself belonging to the R&D, Research and Development department. We have a very strong R&D team structured around agri-science, engineering, and IT. And I set sustainability requirements at the outset of projects, so by being directly involved in running projects. And we're working on different projects for this year. So soon there will be a new packaging, the one that you're seeing on the right side. So we are only sourcing from renewable raw materials. In that case, it's paper, which is non-coated. And also looking very much at the end properties of the life cycle of the product. How is it going to be, is it compostable or not? Is it de facto compostable or not? And taking all these aspects into consideration. Our strategy is ambitious because our long-term goal is carbon neutrality. Hopefully will still exist in 2050, which is the horizon set by the cities. And we are declining our goals and KPIs around these very ambitious targets. Next step, and I'm done, is conducting a real life cycle assessment focus in a second step on social impact goals and KPIs, because for now we're very much focusing on environmental integrity, and then looking at not only products but also processes. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, and I'm looking forward for the questions.
Thank you very much, Marie. It was a really, really interesting presentation. As we wait for the questions to start coming in, I will just ask one question that I'm really interested in. So you mentioned that you are interested, that InFarm is the system is devised to be soil-free. Let's say you import some land, but you are soil-free. And when we talk about resource use and resource consumption, we always talk about land and water. And
Yeah.
I have recently learned that soil is also a finite resource, and that soil is also becoming scarce in some areas. So it is really important, obviously, to develop solutions that will use less soil, because soil will be more and more valuable. For example, we have found out today at our project that in some countries, for example, in Lithuania, 80% of the land is owned by 3 or 4 big companies. So it's also a question of access to land and availability and quality of soil. So what is your stance? We'll be hearing about soil as a valuable finite resource in the future, as we are now talking about water and about water and others.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're raising a very interesting point. I mean, if you're talking about climate change, the focus on the policy level was very much looking at atmospheric emissions, right? While now the debate has been shifting to the focus on soil, and how incredible that is that we actually know very little about soils, but what we know is that we are heavily depending on it, and that land degradation is a very big subject. So I would say the value of InFarm, it depends. We always have to look at the local the local availability of resources, or let's say the local challenges. For CO2, it can be, I think, it can be tackled on a more macro level, but definitely for soil and water, this is it's a very local issue, but becoming also kind of embedded in our system, because normally locality is linked to the place where we are, where you are, right? So you are depending on this very much cultural good that is soil. In our case, it's very important to say we can raise productivity by trying to do sustainable intensive farming, and doing that, we're able to kind of save land that would have otherwise been used for the same purpose. So for example, 1 square meter of InFarm farm allows us to produce like more than 11 times, comparing it to an open field. You have always to be very, very cautious, because these figures, there are a lot of assumptions behind them, but we do believe that our system could be a potential solution to protect our soil. Now, for the growing medium that we are using, this is also a current project we're working on, trying to find a more sustainable option than using organic matter, which has some peat content, which is a very, very hot topic, I would say. And if you're talking about Lithuania and Eastern countries, I think you know what I'm referring to.
Yes. Thank you, Marie. while we are waiting for questions, can you just tell us how do you think this model will go in other countries? And you mentioned to me in our talk that you are expanding to France.
Yes. Which side are you, what do you mean, from the consumer side?
Yes, that's what I'm interested in. Yes.
Okay.
How consumers, for example, in France, which is a food-rich culture, will respond to this idea of urban farming.
Yeah, that's again a good question. I'm French myself. Maybe you heard it. So maybe I can answer that question, or at least from a personal standpoint. I'm myself a bit curious about how it will go. I think urban farming is really on the rise right now. Paris has a very ambitious policy. Developing around hydroponics. So I think hydroponics is, a lot of more people are getting aware of what hydroponics is, and this is a very good first step because even though hydroponics has been existing for already more than 50 years, most of the people, they still have this collective imaginary of your grandfather farming in his beautiful little farm in the middle of France. And this is how big companies are selling our products. And of course, it's not depicting the reality. And I think it will depend a lot on our capacity to really emphasize the sustainability of from my perspective, this is a main point, our capacity to position ourselves on and to highlight our sustainability added value there. But definitely there will be some challenges in bringing in, we are kind of recreating a climate. However, we're also injecting mimicking a lot of natural processes. We are now starting a research project on microbiology to introduce microbiology in our systems. So the idea is not to compete with nature or to do better. It's rather to learn from it, and we think this is just one way, together with other local distribution systems.
Yes, that's an interesting topic, and I believe that together with all the technology, we will still have to have some sort of awareness campaign, consumer awareness campaign, whether it be food waste or vertical urban farming or new ways to consume food. We have another question for you. Can you see it in chat? Okay.
Yeah, just saw it. So how are we addressing high demand of energy and water in our hydroponic system, and how would you see it affect development that have scarce resources? Does it have a future in developing countries? Okay, so first, high demand of energy is definitely a challenge. As much as there is renewable energy, still they're not totally carbon neutral, as you might know. So even though wind energy and hydro have a very low CO2 footprint, for sure we have to develop in a way that makes the smart use of our energy consumption. And for this, you have several ways. You can work on your lighting system, and this is also, also developing LEDs lights that you can really trim according to the different development stages of the plants. Then you can also, technology is gonna play a big role in developing smart grid management, so that we can really shift also our consumption during the time which most of the people don't consume energy, given that that's the main problem of energy sector for now. For the water part, actually we're very efficient on the water footprint side. We are It's a very rough figure, but it's very difficult to estimate it. But we really have, because we're running in closed loop, we are 70% more efficient than open field agriculture. We don't have any kind of runoff out of the system. So actually this creates value, especially for countries that are water scarce, but might be energy rich, for example, no? So it's a bit the thing, as I was saying before, is like being sustainable on all sides is very difficult. So it's a matter of trade-offs. It's a matter of yeah, trying to understand what's the real added value for different local settings. And if it has a future in developing countries, I think it could have a future in developing countries for sure, where sanitary issues are very, very problematic.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So I hope I answered this question.
Yes.
I see another one, which is, did publishing of SDG goals influence the strategy in any way? Yes, for sure, it influenced the strategy because it has been published before we started. So that was a great help. I mean, we knew about the Millennium Goals, but it's very nice to see that there is the recognition of the importance of the role of businesses in contributing to that, and not just leaving the goals on a very political level. So I think it definitely influences in the way, in the vocabulary we're using, so that, you know, because if you talk to policymakers, or I was working before in the academia, it was quite a cultural shock for me to come in a startup, because we're just not talking the same language. So it's definitely a great help, yes. I would say also in developing the key performance indicators, I mean, it drives, it helps structuring, I would say, the work, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I've heard this a lot of times when talking about sustainable development goals to various people from the industry, from academia. It's really useful and good to have a common set of indicators and objectives and goals that we can refer to. Because if you are just saying that you're working on more sustainable production, that is now not enough. We now have to measure them, compare them, and see how far we can come and how can we progress further. So, and
also another point is that the kind of position that I have is pretty new, I mean, in the field, right? So it's like you're creating a position, trying to understand the environment is constantly changing. It's very important to have these goals that gives, and also some, you know, some weight and some metrics. Because otherwise, I mean, in the end, you know, you always have to bring it to make the business case of what you develop. And in the end, you're talking, of course, about quantification of qualitative features, which is very difficult. And you have to pitch them, and so again, trade-off between the different, you know, business aspects.
Yes, definitely, definitely, and it's the idea of the Sustainable Development Goals to all come together and think about solutions and work together and try to, achieve all of them. They are ambitious, but they can be doable if we all start working on them. So our time is up, unfortunately. Thank you very much, Marie, for joining us, for speaking at our webinar. And thank you also to Professor Matosan for
You're welcome.
For speaking about Podravka and what is Podravka doing in sustainability. Thank you all for participating and for tuning in. As we have said at the beginning, this webinar has been recorded, so it will be published on our YouTube channel afterwards. You will all get the link via email, and so you can watch it again or something. And thank you everyone for participating, and tune in our next webinar. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.